That night, sitting alone in my office, Lucas, quietly clicked on the last video file. The dim blue light from the computer screen was the only source of light, shining on my tense face. Each image appeared, making my breathing heavier by the second. Then, that moment appeared, a scene I never thought I would have to witness in this life. Emily, my wife, the woman I loved and trusted more than anyone else, stood in our bedroom, her arms around my neighbor Mark. The way she smiled, the loving gaze that should have been reserved for me, it was like a cold knife piercing my heart. They whispered something to each other, then walked towards the bed. I couldn't bear to look any longer, but I couldn't look away either. I turned off the screen, leaving the room in darkness. My mind reeled, trying to come up with a rational explanation, but how could I? For the past 6 years, I had been living a lie without even knowing it. She had lied to me, and worse, to the man I once called a friend. I remembered the first moments I met Emily. We had been madly in love, building a dream life together, but now, the image of a virtuous wife and a gentle mother was just a perfect cover for a cruel betrayal. And Mark, the neighbor who always appeared at the right time when I needed help, he was also part of this farce. Anger rose, but I knew I couldn't lose control. I needed to think clearly because reacting impulsively would only cost me everything. I walked out of the office. The light in the house was still warm, peaceful, as if nothing had happened. Emily was asleep, her lips slightly curled in a dream, perhaps thinking of someone else, not me. I quietly walked past Alex's room, our 6-year-old son. He was sleeping soundly, his cheeks rosy, his breathing steady. Looking at Alex, I couldn't help but wonder, is he really my son? That question was like another knife stabbing deeper into my heart. But no matter what, I still loved Alex. That child did not deserve to suffer anything from the mistakes of adults. I told myself, if I had to walk away, I would make sure Alex had the best life possible. Back in my office, I opened a drawer and took out a notebook. I began writing down the steps I needed to take, the things I needed to prepare. I couldn't act right away. Emily still thought I was oblivious. She was still playing her game, and I would let her play it until I was ready to turn the tables. I thought about how Emily had told me a few days ago. "We're having twins, Lucas," she'd said with a big smile, her eyes shining with joy. I'd faked a smile, hugged her, and whispered, "This is wonderful." But inside, I felt like I was sinking into an abyss. It wasn't joy, it was fear. I'd sensed something was wrong for a long time, and now I knew the truth. My plan wasn't simply to expose Emily. I wanted her to feel exactly the pain she had caused me. I wanted to protect what was mine, my assets, my honor, and my love for Alex. She had turned our marriage into a farce, and I was going to end it with an unforgettable final chapter. Looking back at the computer screen, I opened the video file again. This time, I didn't flinch or avoid it. I observed everything closely, every little detail, every expression of Emily and Mark. I looked not just to confirm, but to remember. Those images would be the evidence, the thing I would use to win this battle. That night, I didn't sleep. Pain, anger, and determination mixed together in a hot stream of blood running through my veins. Everything had changed, and I, Lucas, was no longer the blindly trusting man I had been before. As dawn broke, I knew one thing for sure. This was the beginning of the perfect revenge plan. My life, from the outside, seemed perfect. A devoted husband, a happy family with a beautiful wife and lovely children. But as they say, the calm surface of a lake sometimes hides turbulent undercurrents. It all started with the little details, the fleeting signs that I had naively overlooked. My wife Emily looked different these days. She suddenly spent more time on herself, taking better care of her appearance than before. At first, I thought it was the joy of being pregnant with twins. Women have the right to take care of themselves to feel more beautiful when pregnant, I told myself, trying to quell the insecurity that was creeping up inside me. But it wasn't just her appearance that changed. The way Emily spoke to me had changed too. She was always cheerful, strangely enthusiastic, but that enthusiasm seemed to be a veil hiding something I couldn't quite name. Mark, my next-door neighbor, was one of the few close friends I ever trusted. He was always there for me when I needed him, from fixing my appliances to babysitting Alex when I was busy. I used to think of that warmth as something precious, but now, whenever I think of the moments when Mark would come over, the way he would look at Emily, I feel a chill run down my spine. There was something between them, I knew, a comfort, a familiarity that was beyond normal. Still, I tried to push these thoughts away. Perhaps I was overthinking, creating unrealistic scenarios. I blamed myself for doubting my wife, the woman who had been with me for more than 10 years. But those doubts did not disappear, but grew stronger. Every time I went on a business trip, thoughts of Emily and Mark would appear, like a needle silently stabbing into my mind. Things started to make sense when I noticed Emily frequently receiving calls or texts that she quickly turned off when I was around. Just friends checking in, she said with a small smile, but her eyes were averted. One time, I saw Mark's name flash on her phone screen. I asked, but Emily just smiled and said that Mark needed her help picking out a birthday present for his wife. The explanation sounded reasonable, but in the back of my mind, suspicion still burned. Alex, my 6-year-old son, has been on my mind lately. He's still innocent and adorable, but sometimes I notice that there's something about his face that's not like me. I kick myself for thinking that. Alex is my son, the child I love more than anything in the world, but the thought keeps coming back, like a poisonous seed sprouting from the soil of doubt. A small but powerful event changed everything. I returned home from a business trip earlier than expected. When I walked in, I found Mark sitting on the sofa, chatting with Emily. They both looked a little startled to see me, but quickly recovered. Mark came over to fix a leaky faucet, Emily explained, but her voice was strained. I said nothing, just nodded, but I knew deep down that this familiarity had crossed a line. That night, I lay awake, unable to sleep. The pieces of the puzzle began to come together in my head, forming a picture I didn't want to believe was true. My feelings for Emily, my trust in Mark, were all weighed down by a deep pain. I had to figure things out. I couldn't live with this doubt any longer. After that night, I knew I couldn't just sit around and second-guess myself. I had to face the truth, no matter how painful it was. As the days passed, I silently observed and prepared. Emily had no idea that I was watching her every little move. The first thing I did was install hidden cameras in the house. I didn't want to do it, but I had no choice. I chose strategic locations: the living room, the kitchen, the hallway, and the bedroom. At first, I felt like an intruder in my own personal space, but my suspicions crossed all boundaries. If Emily was cheating on me, I needed proof. Just a few days after installing the camera, I started noticing things that were unusual. There were moments when Mark would come over without warning. He and Emily would sit close together, laughing, and sometimes their eyes would look at each other in a way that was more intimate than usual. But what hurt me the most was when I saw Emily standing at the door, saying goodbye to Mark with a smile that I thought was only for me. She looked at him as if he meant the world to me. I didn't need any more proof to know that this relationship had gone beyond friendship. But I didn't stop there. I knew I needed more evidence to prepare me for what was to come. I decided to check Emily's phone. I waited until she was fast asleep, then quietly took her phone from the bedside table. My heart raced as I unlocked it. Scrolling through the messages and call logs, I noticed that Mark appeared more often than anyone else. The messages were short, seemingly harmless, but full of hidden meaning. "Thanks for today," or "You made my day." Words that I knew weren't meant for a regular neighbor. What broke me the most was when I found a bunch of selfies of Emily. Photos I'd never seen before. She was wearing clothes I'd never seen her buy, smiling in a way I had not seen her smile in a long time. Some of them had been sent to Mark. I didn't have to guess what they were for. But what really pushed me to dig deeper was when I noticed Emily deleting a string of messages right in front of me. That's when I realized she wasn't just hiding it. She was actively erasing all traces. But I wasn't fooled. I had installed a monitoring app on her phone that allowed me to access her messages, calls, and even her GPS location without her knowing. And then the final piece of evidence appeared. One evening, while I was away on a business trip, I received a notification from my surveillance system. Emily had texted Mark, "Come over tonight. Lucas isn't home." The invitation cut through me like a knife. I turned on the remote camera system and watched every second. Mark walked into my house with a smile on his face, carrying a bottle of wine. They sat close together on the sofa, and I didn't need to watch any longer to know what happened next. I turned off the screen and sat quietly in my hotel room. The pain mixed with anger, but instead of acting immediately, I reminded myself, don't let your emotions rule. You have to wait for the right moment. I spent the night plotting my moves. If I wanted to win, I had to be perfectly prepared. The next day, I made an appointment with a lawyer. He had a reputation for being sharp and tough, which was exactly what I needed. I gave him the initial evidence and began discussing how to protect my assets. Every meeting, every document was prepared in the strictest secrecy. I didn't want Emily or Mark to find out anything. Meanwhile, I was also beginning to suspect another truth: Alex, the son I had always loved. Still, the thought that Alex might not be my biological son weighed heavily on my heart. One night, I decided to do a DNA test. I collected hair samples from me and Alex and sent them to the lab. The results came back a few weeks later, and even though I was mentally prepared, it still made my heart sink. Alex was not my son. I sat there for hours, feeling every second of pain and betrayal, but I couldn't let this break me. I loved Alex, regardless of blood. It wasn't his fault, but this only strengthened my resolve. Emily and Mark had ruined everything, and they were paying the price. When the truth was revealed, I, Lucas, knew I couldn't live with this drama, but I wasn't the type to rush into confrontation without thinking. Emily and Mark had been silently destroying my life for 6 years. I decided that if I had to end it, I would do it with the utmost preparation, so that they wouldn't just lose everything, but also feel the pain I had suffered. I began to build my plan step by step. My first goal was to protect Alex. He was not my biological son, but I had raised him and loved him as if he were my own. I did not want Alex to be a casualty in this battle. To ensure that, I contacted a child custody attorney, explained the situation, and made a plan to gain custody of Alex. The DNA test result was a blow, but I did not let it affect my determination to keep Alex by my side. Next up was finances. I knew Emily would probably try to take a large chunk of my assets during the divorce, so I started transferring large sums of money into secret accounts under shell companies. I also sold off some of my non-essential assets, converting them into cash to make them harder to track. Everything I did was overseen by my attorney, who reminded me that everything had to be completely legal. I left no stone unturned. In addition to protecting myself, I also began to gather more evidence. The hidden camera footage was a start, but I wanted more evidence to hold Emily and Mark accountable. I hired a private investigator to follow them. Within weeks, I had a series of photos and a detailed report. Emily and Mark met regularly in private places, from coffee shops to motels. I also received copies of their text messages, full of sweet nothings and secret plans they had kept from me. Every time I saw the evidence, the pain flooded my heart. But instead of letting it make me lose my temper, I used it as motivation to move forward. Emily thought she was smart, that I was still the stupid husband, blinded by love, but I had changed. Now, I was not just a betrayed husband, but a man with a perfect plan to get justice. My plan was not only to protect myself, but also to turn the tables on her at an unexpected moment. Emily had planned a gender reveal party for the twins. I agreed, playing the happy husband, enthusiastically supporting everything. In my heart, I knew that this would be the final stage, where all the truth would be revealed. This would be the moment I turned her happy day into a nightmare. In the meantime, I practiced keeping a calm, even happy appearance. I smiled at Emily, chatted with Mark when he came over, and acted like everything was fine. But inside, I was coldly calculating every detail. Every night, I sat in front of my computer, reviewing the videos, the messages, the evidence I had collected. I took careful notes, organized them into separate categories, so that when the time came, I could present them as convincingly as possible. I also prepared myself emotionally. I knew that when I faced Emily and Mark, I would be swept away by anger if I didn't control it well. So I reminded myself every day, this is not the time to let my emotions rule. This is a game, and you have to win. Morning runs and silent nights of reflection helped me practice calmness and determination. Finally, I prepared a special gift for the party. A carefully wrapped gift box containing 2 things: divorce papers and DNA test results. This would be my way of announcing the truth, not only to Emily and Mark, but also to all my friends and family. This would be the moment I freed myself from the lies that had suffocated me for 6 years. As the day of the party approached, I felt a strange sense of peace. Not because I had forgotten the pain, but because I knew I was ready. I was no longer the Lucas I once was, the naive boy who believed love was forever. I had changed, and when the time came, I would not only tear down the veil of lies, but rebuild my life from the ashes. After I had my plan in place, I knew that the most important thing was to keep Emily from suspecting anything. Everything had to be done perfectly, from my daily behavior to maintaining the facade of a loving husband. If she found out even a little bit, everything would fall apart before I could do anything. So I started playing the perfect husband. Every morning, I woke up early as usual, made breakfast for the family, and played with Alex. Those moments with him helped me stay sane in the midst of the storm of emotions. Alex beamed as I lifted him into the air, and I silently reminded myself, it's not his fault. This is about Emily and what she did. But even though I loved Alex, I couldn't help but feel heartbroken at the thought that I wasn't his biological father. Still, I decided that my love for Alex would not change, regardless of blood. Emily was still oblivious, still thinking of me as a devoted husband and a good father. She continued to live in the make-believe world she had created, happily planning the gender reveal party. I listened to her talk about her ideas for decorations, the menu, and the guest list. She was excited, even asking my opinion on whether the balloons should be blue or pink. I smiled and nodded in agreement to everything she said. Even as I was boiling with anger, I realized that to maintain this facade, I needed absolute control over my emotions. When Emily was away, I allowed myself to feel hurt and angry. But when she was home, I put on a mask of calm. I couldn't let any trace of doubt show on my face or in my demeanor. That night, after Emily and Alex had gone to bed, I sat alone in my office. On my desk were the divorce papers I had prepared with my lawyer, the hidden camera footage, and the copies of the text messages I had collected. I reviewed each video over and over, not to hurt myself further, but to make sure that all the evidence was logically arranged and indisputable. This was more than a divorce. This was my way of reclaiming my dignity, my self-respect, and my future. Emily sometimes asks me why I stay up late these days. I just smile and say that work has been busier than usual. She doesn't doubt it, and even encourages me to get more rest. I look into her eyes, trying to find some sign of regret, but all I see is contentment, as if she's living the perfect life. One time, she suggested that we go out for a romantic dinner to keep the fire burning in our marriage. I agreed, not because I wanted to, but because I needed to maintain this role. At the restaurant, she laughed and talked, her hand on mine as if we were the perfect couple. But her every gesture, her every word now made me feel like a joke. I looked at her, smiling gently, but in my heart there was only one thought. Keep going, Emily. The upcoming party will be the end of it all. In the weeks that followed, I maintained perfect normalcy. I took Emily to prenatal appointments, listened to the doctor talk about the twins' development. I attended parent-teacher conferences at Alex's school, took family photos when Emily asked, and even agreed to help her invite guests to her party. I did everything I could to make Emily think I was still the naive, unconditionally loving husband, but inside I was calculating. Every step Emily took, every action Mark took, I was carefully remembering. I wasn't just preparing for the evidence, but also preparing for the day I would face them both, where everyone would see the truth. It wasn't just a plan for revenge, but a way for me to start over completely. During the day, I continued to play the role of a devoted husband, but when the house was quiet at night, that was when I took off my mask. I entered a different world, a world of preparation, calculation, and the cold truth that I had to face alone. Two people existed inside me, a loving father and caring husband in front of Emily, and a man determined to bring justice in the darkness. I spent most of the night perfecting my plan. Every document, every piece of evidence I had collected was carefully arranged, like a puzzle piece. The videos were clearly labeled living room, Monday, bedroom, Friday. The text messages between Emily and Mark were printed out. Each line, each sentence filled with the sweet nothings I had thought were meant only for me. I also kept track of Mark's movements. With the help of the detective, I knew that he often visited Emily's house when I was away on business. I also knew that he often gave her small gifts, from jewelry to her favorite books. I used to think that these were hobbies that only I understood about Emily. But now, all of this was evidence that she shared those moments with someone else, not me. The long nights became a test of will. I fought through anger, hurt, and frustration. There were times when I wanted to storm into the bedroom, turn on the light, and confront Emily. I wanted to scream, to ask her why she did it, but I knew that an impulsive reaction would destroy everything I had planned. So I held back. Every time anger rose, I reminded myself, you can't lose control. Wait for the right moment. In addition to preparing evidence, I also focused on protecting my assets. I met regularly with lawyers to ensure that all accounts and assets were kept safe. A large amount of money was transferred to a separate fund in Alex's name, as a way for me to protect him. I did not want Emily or Mark to have the opportunity to touch anything that belonged to me or Alex. All the while, Emily remained unsuspecting. She continued planning the gender reveal party for the twins. She invited friends, family, and even Mark and his wife. Every time she mentioned the party, I nodded and smiled in agreement. I even commented on the decorations, as if I was in full support. In fact, I knew that this would be the day I turned the tables. One evening, Emily sat next to me on the sofa, talking about whether to choose pink or blue balloons for the party. "What do you think, Lucas?" she asked. "What should we do to surprise everyone?" I looked at her, smiling softly but feeling bitter inside. "Do whatever makes you happy," I replied. She didn't notice the double meaning in my words. As for me, I just sat there, watching the woman who had once been my everything become a stranger. One of the most memorable moments was when Emily accidentally left her phone on the kitchen table and I saw a new text from Mark. "Can't wait. Last night was great," it read. Anger welled up inside me, but I took a deep breath and kept my face calm. I took a screenshot and saved the message to my evidence collection. Emily returned, holding her phone, not realizing that I had read her secret. In the last days before the party, I felt a strange calm. Not because I was no longer in pain, but because I knew I was fully prepared. I continued to play the role of the perfect husband, the caring father, but every gesture, every word of mine carried a coldness that only I could recognize. I stood in front of the mirror, looked at myself, and said to myself, "Just a little more. You will free yourself, and all the truth will be revealed." I was no longer afraid. I was ready. The day of the party finally arrived. My garden was decorated to perfection, twinkling lights strung around the trees, the table covered with a pristine white tablecloth, and a large black balloon hanging in the middle of the yard, ready to explode to reveal the gender of the twins. The laughter of friends and family could be heard everywhere, but it all felt distant, like I was standing outside of this world. Emily looked stunning in her tight white dress, her face lit up with a fake happy smile. She walked from table to table, clasping hands with the guests to thank them for coming. No one could have guessed that beneath her flawless appearance was a series of lies that had lasted for 6 years. I stood silently near the corner of the courtyard, watching her and the guests with a cold gaze, waiting for the moment I had long prepared. Mark was there, of course. He stood near the table, a glass of wine in his hand, chatting with a few of his neighbors. His appearance was as casual and friendly as ever, but his eyes kept darting to Emily. Every time their eyes met, they both quickly looked away, but no one in the crowd noticed the underlying tension, except me. The guests arrived one by one, laughing and talking, discussing the twins' gender. "It's definitely a boy," one of Emily's close friends said. "They look so happy. It must be a blessing." I just smiled, took a sip of water, and kept quiet. The congratulations hit me like a punch in the gut, but I didn't show any emotion. This party wasn't for me to be happy. This was the stage for the finale I'd been waiting for. Alex ran up to me, grabbed my hand, and smiled. "Daddy, I think I'm gonna have 2 little brothers." I bent down and put my hands on his shoulders, looking into his bright eyes. "We'll find out soon enough, son," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. Little did he know that his life was about to change forever. Once everyone was settled, Emily stepped up to a small podium in the middle of the field. She held a microphone in her hand, her eyes beaming at the crowd. "Thank you all for coming today," she said, her voice filled with excitement. Today is not only a special day for our family, but also an opportunity for us to share our joy with our loved ones. Applause erupted from all around. I stood there, expressionless, watching the whole thing like a cold spectator. Emily continued, "Before we reveal the genders of the babies, I want to give a special thanks to my wonderful husband, Lucas. He has been by my side, the strongest support you could ask for." She turned to me, a bright smile on her face. I nodded slightly, but inside I felt cold. The whole crowd turned to look at me, applauding. I knew what they were thinking. Lucas is so lucky to have a wife like Emily. But they didn't know that in the next moment, I would destroy everything Emily had built. Emily raised her hand toward the large ball hanging in the middle of the field. "And now, the moment we've all been waiting for," she said, her voice filled with excitement. "Lucas, would you like to help me do this?" I stepped onto the stage, her eyes filled with anticipation, but she didn't realize that this would be the last moment she thought everything was under control. Before I touched the ball, I paused, pulling a small box from my pocket. "Before we do this, I have a gift for you," I said, my voice low but clear. The crowd fell silent, watching my every move curiously. Emily, a little taken aback at first, quickly broke into a bright smile. "You always know how to surprise me," she said, unaware that what awaited her was not a romantic gift. I handed her the small box. It was carefully wrapped in bright paper and pretty ribbons, but inside was a cold truth. Emily slowly opened the box, the smile on her face fading as she saw what was inside. A neatly sealed divorce document and a set of DNA test results with my name and Alex's name printed boldly across the top. The garden was so quiet I could hear the wind blowing through the trees. Emily looked at me, her eyes wide with confusion. "Lucas, what is this?" she asked, her voice trembling. But before she could say more, I took a step forward, turning to face the crowd. "I think this is a good time to reveal another truth," I said, my voice clear and authoritative. "The children in Emily's belly are not mine. They belong to Mark." As my words rang out, the crowd froze. Silence fell over everyone, leaving only looks of shock and confusion. Emily stood there, eyes wide, lips trembling slightly. "Lucas, what are you talking about? Is this a joke?" She forced a smile, trying to hide the panic that was evident on her face. But I didn't laugh. I looked her straight in the eye, my voice cold. "Did you think I would never find out, Emily? For 6 years, you've lied, deceived, and betrayed me. And today, everyone here will know the truth." I took a step forward, turned to the crowd, and raised the document in my hand. "I have irrefutable evidence in my hands," I said loudly enough for everyone to hear. "These are divorce papers, and here are the DNA test results, proving that Alex, the son I have loved for the past 6 years, is not my biological son." A murmur began to spread through the crowd, and looks of surprise and pity were directed toward Emily. Emily could barely stand. "Lucas, you're mistaken. How could you think that?" she said, her voice cracking, tears starting to stream down her cheeks. But I didn't stop. I pointed at Mark, who was standing silently in the corner of the yard, his face pale. "And this is Mark, the man I once considered a friend, but who has actually betrayed me for the past 6 years. The children Emily is carrying are not mine, but his." I pointed at him, my words cutting through the air like knives. The crowd turned to Mark, their eyes filled with anger and shock. Mark stuttered, trying to say something but failing. "Lucas, you're going too far," he said, his voice shaking. "This is a misunderstanding. I don't know what you're talking about." "Misunderstanding?" I sneered, pulling a series of printed photos and messages from my pocket. I held them up for everyone to see. "These are the messages between Emily and Mark, the sweet words of love they exchanged behind my back. These are photos of them meeting at the motel when I was away on business. And this is a video from my own house where they thought I would never find out." I threw the documents on the table, letting them fall in front of everyone. Emily screamed in despair, tears streaming down her face uncontrollably. "Lucas, please, listen to me. I didn't mean it. It was all a mistake." She stepped closer to me, trying to touch my hand, but I stepped back, my gaze cold as steel. "Don't touch me, Emily. You had 6 years to explain, but you chose to lie. Now, you will face the consequences. The crowd was silent now. Whispers and looks of surprise and anger were directed at Emily and Mark. A few people standing near Mark quietly stepped back, as if they didn't want to be associated with him. Mark's wife, who had been standing nearby with a glass of wine in her hand, now had a stiff face, tears streaming down her face. She didn't say a word, just stared at Mark with contempt and pain. I turned to Alex, who was standing nearby, his face filled with fear and confusion. I bent down and put my hands on his shoulders. Son, this has nothing to do with you. You will always be my favorite son, and that will never change. Alex burst into tears, hugging me tightly. My heart sank, but I knew I had to stay strong. Turning back to Emily, I said, "As for you, Emily, I have nothing more to say. Enjoy your life with Mark, but I will not let you touch the property or have any rights to Alex. I have prepared everything to ensure that you and Mark never have the opportunity to destroy anything more in my life." Mark stepped forward, trying to say something, but I held up my hand. "Don't say anything. You had the chance to tell the truth, but you chose to betray me. From now on, I don't need to hear another word from you." I turned to the crowd, my voice low but strong. "I thank everyone for coming here today, but this party is no longer necessary. The truth has been revealed, and now I need to leave, to start a new life." I took Alex's hand and walked through the silent crowd. Each step I took felt like a release from the weight of 6 years of pain. I didn't look back at Emily or Mark, because I knew I had said enough, done enough. What they faced now were the consequences of their own choices. As the garden gate closed behind me, I felt a sense of relief for the first time in years. This was not just an end, but the beginning of a new journey, one that I would live with the dignity and freedom I deserved. As the garden gate closed behind me, I felt a chill wash over me, but it wasn't pain or despair. It was the release of a burden that had been weighing me down for the past 6 years. I walked away, holding Alex's hand, feeling the eyes of the partygoers on me. All that needed to be said had been said, and now it was time for them to process their own feelings. As for me, I was ready to face my new life. The days following the party were tumultuous. News of the party's revelation spread quickly throughout the neighborhood, and gossip began to spread. Emily, once the epitome of perfection and happiness, was now surrounded by criticism and contempt. Friends, neighbors, and even family members began to distance themselves from her. Emily lost not only her credibility, but also the social network she had relied on. Mark, who had once prided himself on being a friendly and kind man, now faced serious consequences. His wife, after learning the whole truth at the party, immediately moved out of the house, took their 2 children with her, and filed for divorce. I heard that she used the evidence I provided to gain custody of the children, and a large sum of money from Mark. He was left with an empty house, facing mounting debts, and a ruined life. As for Emily, she tried to contact me several times after the party, but I refused to respond. Her messages were filled with apologies, pleas, and excuses, but to me, none of them were enough to justify 6 years of lies and betrayal. I decided to completely cut off all contact with her, beyond what was necessary to finalize the divorce. In court, I entered the courtroom perfectly prepared. I had all the documents and evidence in order, and worked closely with my attorney to ensure that Emily could not harm my property or interests. As the videos were played in court, silence fell over the courtroom. Emily kept her head down, not daring to look up, while her attorney was unable to defend herself. As a result, I won custody of Alex, the most important thing to me. Although he was not my biological child, I loved him as if he were my own. The court also decided that Emily would not receive any of my assets, because her acts of betrayal had seriously violated my rights in the marriage. It was all over quickly and clearly, a victory I'd fought so hard to achieve. After the trial, Alex and I moved to a new place, far away from the painful memories. I chose a small coastal town where the sound of the waves could soothe my soul. The new house was not big, but cozy and full of light. Alex adapted very quickly. He was always happy to run around on the beach, and I felt reassured when I saw his innocent smile. At first, I worried that Alex would ask about what had happened, about his mother and the painful truths, but he seemed to understand that some things didn't need to be said, at least not yet. I spent as much time as I could with Alex. taking him to school, playing ball on the beach, and reading bedtime stories. Gradually, the painful memories faded, giving way to moments of peace and new hope. I also started to rebuild my life. I continued to work, but I no longer devoted all my time to it like before. I learned to slow down and appreciate the little things around me. Morning runs along the beach, evenings watching the sunset with Alex, all helped me feel the true value of life. As for Emily, I heard that she lived with Mark for a while, but their relationship quickly fell apart. The betrayal of their loved ones left them two lonely and broken people, unable to rebuild trust or love. It was a price they paid, not just from me, but from their own actions. Sometimes I still think about the past, about what happened. Those memories are still painful, but I don't let them define me. I've learned to let go, not because I forgive Emily or Mark, but because I want to free myself. Life is a journey, and I've decided to move on, not carrying the old burdens. One day, while cleaning out a drawer, I found an old family photo of me, Emily, and Alex, taken on a trip many years ago. I looked at my smile in the photo, a happy, innocent smile, unaware that everything would change. I didn't burn the photo. I put it back in the drawer as a reminder that the past, painful as it was gone, and I was in control of my future. Now I stand on the beach, Alex running beside me, the sound of the waves gently lapping at my ears. I breathe deeply, feel the fresh air, and smile. My new life isn't perfect, but it is mine. A life I've reclaimed from the ground up. A life I'm proud to have built from the ground up. "Let's go home, Alex," I called. He ran up, took my hand, and together we walked into the sunset. This was the beginning of a new chapter, one that I knew I would do better than ever.